Why would you just? And then Kajan makes this video on YouTube about how is did my system get exposed? I'm thinking like, dude, it's not a system.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Delbra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. Today we're going to discuss the idea of developing systems and also my afterthoughts on battle mats, which is a tournament that I actually competed in yesterday. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and leave a comment wherever you can, whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. It really, really helps me grow the show. All of your support is appreciated. If you want to check out some of my offerings or products, check the links in the bottom. So let's get started. What is a system? Well, basically a system is a position or an action that can be repeated. And it's not just exclusive to grappling. It could be, there are systems that are in all different types of martial arts. Systems exist everywhere in life. You know, in cooking, I had systems that I would run through every day to organize myself, to make sure that I could complete a task. And when we talk about Kaizen mindset, it's just basically the idea of constantly improving our systems. Sometimes I refer to systems as series, right? So we're doing things in jiu-jitsu, whether it's a position like a back attack system, or an action. Maybe it's a guard passing system. Maybe it's a hand fighting system from the open guard. It really could be anything where there is an encompassed area of action or a task that we're trying to complete that could lead us somewhat closer to success. Anyways, this is a little bit of a jumbled word salad, but essentially it's just like it's an action or a position or a submission that can constantly be repeated in jiu-jitsu. And when we have the idea of systems in jiu-jitsu, rather than just learning moves, we can sort of see a holistic approach to that said move or that said action. I think memorizing, dozens of moves is not super effective in terms of how you're going to file information away in your brain. But when you think about things in systems, for me at least, techniques become a lot more clear and a lot easier to understand. So first thing I would look for when I'm thinking about a system would be to identify what are the critical control points. And generally, when this is a submission, of course, submissions require tons of control, whether it's a leg lock, a joint lock of any kind, upper body joint lock, even like a strangle. There's going to be critical controls that are required to make that submission effective. It's very unlikely that you'll just be able to catch high-level people all the time without using some form of control over them before you reach your submission. So identifying critical control points and identifying the main mechanisms that will actually allow this system to work is very, very important. So for example, if we were going to talk about a system for the inside heel hook from the saddle, we would first need to be able to control the saddle. We would need to be able to have control over our partner's knee line, immobilizing the hip, the knee, and the end of the lever, the foot, to use our said submission. The inside heel hook is probably going to be the most common one from this position, right? But of course, if you had saddle with double trouble, there would be other options. We can now attack the secondary leg with ankle locks. And so it's really important that we're thinking about how we're going to actually control someone and be able to do this reliably and repeatedly over time to get to the eventual goal, which is a submission. A big example of, critical control points as related to submission systems would be Kimura control. So if I was going to teach Kimura to someone from day one, I would first start by explaining to them what the Kimura is, what we're actually doing to our partner's arm to make them weak, and how we can actually control that position for long periods of time. And I think there's probably no other better position to sort of illustrate this than the T Kimura, because you're behind someone, your legs are not yet involved in the form of control, which it could be if you were to put your partner in a crucifix or a side triangle. But just by using your two arms to control their one arm, you can visually illustrate how you can create internal rotation in the shoulder. And once the student understands this critical control point, they can kind of take that anywhere. Okay, as long as I can lock out their shoulder and cause an internal rotation within it, I can control them from almost any position. And this is sort of, it's a common reoccurrence within the Kimura system. We always need our partner's shoulder internally rotated, or else there is no Kimura. All right, systems also need to involve entries, obviously. So how are we going to get to the system? Maybe I got into the Kimura, for example, by creating a guard pass situation. Maybe I was on the back and I switched to Kimura. Maybe I had an armbar and I switched to Kimura. There's so many different ways to get to the Kimura. So there's always going to be entries to get into a said system. If it's a leg attack system, you could have entries from the top. You could have entries from the bottom. You could have many different ways that we could enter the legs, right? And so every system has to have some kind of an entry point. And just like there's an entry point to every system, there always needs to be escapes and counters to every system. And especially when we're talking about exchanging submissions like leg attacks, there's always going to be ways to escape these positions. There's always going to be counters to these positions and follow-ups. So if my opponent escapes, how can I perhaps make a positional advancement? How could I branch this system out so that I'm not just thinking about submitting them, but if they do escape, I'm thinking about passing the guard or taking the back or doing whatever I'm going to do. In terms of counters, if somebody's attacking me, can I join my own attack and sort of make this a shootout situation and catch my opponent off guard? How am I going to implicate my own counters rather than just escapes? So these, entries, escapes, counters, these are all very, very important things when we're thinking about systems, because there's always going to come different reactions from your opponent, which we're going to talk about in a second here. And how can we join other systems? So if I'm going to use a Kimura, I already mentioned we can enter Kimuras through guard passing situations. The Kimura is one of the most versatile systems in jiu-jitsu because you can join so many different systems to it. You can take the back with it. You can pass the guard with it. You can enter arm bars, triangles. There's just so many different upper body attacks we can do with the Kimura. It can take us to so many different places. And it truly is one of the most versatile, useful systems in jiu-jitsu. And by understanding how to join the Kimura to other systems and to create an attack chain, as it were, that is a very, very valuable thing, because it can lead you down a strong cycle of offense all the way down the line as your opponent's defending. And quite often, if your opponent keeps defending, you can keep sort of re-attacking and rebooting the system in ways, or switching off to another system. A very common attack chain in wrestling would be, okay, I'm going to get to a single leg, I'm going to use the single leg to run the pipe. Opponent defends running the pipe. I switch off to a body lock, and then from there I'm attacking from rear body lock. Rear body lock fails, I can even go back into a single, right? And so it's like a chain of, that's a very basic example, but there's a chain of offense, and there's a term in wrestling, chain wrestling is what they call it, and you've probably heard of that if you know anything about grappling, if you listen to this show. And so we should think about our attacks being chained together so that we can constantly re-attack, and we're not just like trying 2 or 3 attacks and then we run out of attack options. We always have something else that we can go to, or we can switch off to another system. And generally systems, in my opinion, they always keep us in a good within some kind of control. Or even if we're on the defensive cycle, we can use systems to regain control or re-enter the offensive cycle, or even just a neutral cycle if we're trying to escape something. And, I don't really consider pin escapes as systems, but there are underlying concepts and, common concepts that are happening when we're trying to escape pins. Fight back to the inside position, get the lower body back involved so that we can recover our guard, and then from there create offense by off balancing our opponent from the guard. Like there's always going to be like linear common concepts within something like pin escapes. But even though it is a negative position, you're in the bottom, you're in a disadvantageous position, we don't think about having a system for pin escapes. We think about having offensive systems, attacking the arm, attacking the back, whatever. But really, if you think about it, pin escapes, we do have systems to do that. We do create off balances and get back to the inside position, like I said, and then ideally recovering the guard or wrestling up or whatever we're going to do. Also, I always get asked this question, are notes important? Are concept maps or mind maps useful when it comes to developing systems? And I've had a lot of students ask me about mind maps, and I've had my own urges to develop like a concept map or a mind map where, you're going to write like webs and so that you can kind of see all of your systems out on paper. But the truth is I just don't know how beneficial that would be for myself. Now, that being said, I think that could be very useful for somebody else, especially if they are, if it could help somebody to retain information by looking on a piece of paper or a map and seeing all their thoughts laid out. All the power to you. Everyone learns differently. For me, I've never really found that was a strong way for me to plan out my attacks and my systems. I felt that I just basically had to go in there and do it. And so I truly believe that skill building, you really do have to go in there and feel the positions in a live situation. You cannot just write things down on a piece of paper and then think that you're memorizing it, and then you go in and you can actually perform the techniques because you had the techniques written down on a piece of paper. It's just, for me, I just don't see that carryover. But that's not to say that can't work for someone else, and that's not to say that having a notebook can't work for you. I'm more of a visual learner. So for me, if I am going to take notes, generally what I'll do is I'll just take my phone and I'll just record a video of the technique, and I'll watch it and see the little nuances of it. I'm not so much the kind of guy that will, lay out my ideas in a concept map. And usually the people that ask me about concept maps, I find are people who don't have a ton of experience. Generally, people who have been training as long as me, when you're getting up to like 16 plus years, I think generally it's kind of all up here, and you don't really need to file it away in a mind map. And even if I did put the ideas on paper in a mind map, although that might be satisfying for me, I don't know how beneficial it would be. I don't know if I would come back to that piece of paper and look at it and get anything out of it. But I have had the urge to do it, and I think it would be cool to kind of see how different moves join together. I just don't know how beneficial it is. Okay, so how are we going to develop a system? Really, the only way to do it is to put yourself in the position, whether it's an arm bar system or, a triangle system, a guard passing system, hand fighting. These could all be, anything could be a system in reality, but whatever system you're developing, let's take the Kimura, for example, again, you really just got to put yourself in the position, and you have to feel that position. You have to be both on the on the receiving end of the move. So you need to know what it feels like when the move's being applied to you, and you need to be able to apply the move to somebody to know really the nuances of the position. You have to really identify like reoccurring patterns and concepts within the system. So again, in terms of the Kimura, it would be like internal rotation of the shoulder, a pushing force on the wrist, a pulling force on the elbow. And then of course, another common concept with the Kimura would be, okay, the more the arm is locked out at 90 degrees, the more effective it is. The more that the arm becomes linear, the more that you lose rotational control. Another thing would be this idea of, should I use a C grip to grab someone's wrist, or should I use a thumbless grip? And you can use a C grip to grab someone's wrist, but once I make a figure four, I generally believe that it's better to remove the thumbs and use this so-called monkey grip, because then you can really throttle your wrists and create more internal rotation. So these are all underlying concepts. Another great concept, if we're applying Kimura, let's say, if your partner's hand is in front of their body, think about using the Kimura to advance position. If the hand goes behind the body, now we can go for submission, right? Like this gives us very clear-cut ideas as to which direction we should go to when we have a Kimura. Or if we were going to play like a butterfly guard system, let's change it up a little bit. Now it's butterfly guard. Great concepts would be, okay, I need to have my 2 feet on the inside. I need to have tight structures with my elbows so I'm not giving up underhooks. I need to look to off balance my partner in multiple directions, including heisting up, snapping them down, and also pulling them on top of me and getting underneath them. So these are all things that are common when it comes to entering Ashigarami, X guard, playing butterfly guard, butterfly half guard. These are all sort of things that we're always looking for. determining opponents' predictable reactions. This is incredibly important, and this will really help us map out our system, because when we're put in a position, we're never really going to get the same reactions exactly the same twice, right? But as our opponents start to give us live feedback from the position, we can start to see, okay, what is most common? What is happening here? I've noticed that my opponent does this reaction, 60% of the time. So it's quite a common reaction. And then the other 40% of the time, they're doing giving me two other reactions. So I know what a common reaction is. And from there, I can start to plan for that and adjust for that and create a way to either counter that reaction or to segue into a new system and lead my opponent down a new line of attack, for example. So your opponent's predictable reactions are going to be everything here. And a big mistake that I think people do when they try to do jiu-jitsu is they try to execute moves that they know. And yes, we are trying to do moves, but moves only work at the right time. I always used to watch DVDs, and when I was watching them, I would be shocked at how often I would see things that I thought didn't work. So in my mind, I had already said, okay, this doesn't work. But then I'd watch a DVD and I'd say, oh, well, Danaher's doing that now. And I already had it in my mind that doesn't work, but yet Danaher is here showing it. And get down, these cats. And so what it really means is well, anything can work at the right time, if that makes sense. And so really the key is when you learn a move is you have to know when is the right, just spray my cat here. You have to know when the right time is to do something. You can't just force a move when your opponent's reaction is not the one that you want. And so a lot of this comes into how can we create the reaction that we're looking for, right? How can we make our opponent funnel them into a situation where now they are giving us the appropriate reaction? If you can't do that, you're going to have a hell of a time creating techniques. You're going to have a hell of a time making these techniques work. And aside from predictable reactions, you need to know what techniques work well with together within the system. Not every technique is going to work together. If you're doing takedowns, often you'll be doing takedowns in the opposite direction. You'll be going, if I'm going to go for, let's say, an Osoto in one direction, I want to think about using that in conjunction with a turn throw, because these are working in both backwards and forwards directions. And so the defense of one technique will allow me to enter the other technique. And this is how judo combinations are often put together, because one reaction leads your opponent into the next technique. And so there we can identify, okay, what techniques are going to work well with each other. It wouldn't make sense for me to use two techniques that will not go well together if the reaction that I get from my opponent doesn't lead me into the secondary technique, right? And so developing a sense for what techniques work well together is very, very important as well. So I've been watching some Mikey Musumeci DVDs, and the way he talks about predictable reactions, he talks about it in worlds. It's a very interesting way to look at things. He talks about World 1 and World 2. Right. And maybe there might even be more worlds than this. Basically what this is it's my cat is going crazy right now. Basically what this is it's the idea of your opponent distributing their weight in one way or the other way, right? If your opponent, so a big example would be like the leg hug or like the K guard. Going into K guard, your opponent could be leaning away from you once you enter K guard, and they could also try to crush you. And if they crush you, the standard attacks that you're looking for aren't going to work. But he does inversions underneath and switches off to the other leg. And so he's always talking about, okay, World 1, World 2. If my opponent does this, then I do this. If my opponent gives me World 2, then I know that these other techniques aren't going to be effective. And so that was a really interesting way to look at it. I never thought about it that way, World 1 and World 2. But really all he's talking about is predictable reactions and how is your opponent distributing their weight? I find that when we're new at jiu-jitsu, it's difficult for us to look at what our opponent is giving us and then make a decision. We try to just act instinctively and try and just make decisions. But what's more effective is when we can actually look at our opponent's reactions and then make a decision based on that reaction. And that's where you'll find that techniques really start to work. I think when you're, putting yourself in these positions and trying to develop these systems, you should create different goals for yourself. So you might go into like a knee shield situation. Okay, I'm going to develop my knee shield. What do I want to do here? Well, maybe my goal is just to manage distance this round. And then the next round, okay, maybe my goal is to get to an underhook. Maybe the next round, okay, my goal is just to dominate the hand fight. Next round, okay, my goal is to get on top, right? Or maybe it's enter the legs. It depends. If you switch up your goals rather than just sparring from the position, you can really isolate common problems that are going to come up. And again, throughout this whole thing, you're identifying your opponent's predictable reactions. So creating these different goals and essentially gamifying the position, whether your coach is helping you gamify it or whether you're just gamifying it yourself in sparring, I think you can get a lot of intel out of this type of training. Making sure that you're exploring the entire offensive, defensive, and neutral spectrum of the situation. So you really need to make sure that when you're doing intel on these systems, that you know what it's like when you're deep in the shit and you're stuck on the receiving end of the system, as well as when you're attacking with the system. And then also in the neutral position, how are we going to, let's say I'm in a leg entanglement and I want to improve this position. How am I going to get into a neutral leg entanglement? Right? If I'm in a cross ashy with double trouble, sometimes I just want to get back to a neutral double seated or just extract my knee. And that would be good. I'd be happy with that. I don't always need to go back into the offense right away, although that would be ideal. You really need to think of that offensive, neutral, defensive spectrum and know the entirety of the system throughout that spectrum. That is just going to ensure that you really know how to escape that system, how to apply the system, and how to go in and out of the neutral cycle when you're in that system, whether you're on the receiving end or you're attacking. Take note of nuanced details within the system. I'll give you an example here. There are certain situations in leg entanglements, and I plan on doing some premium courses on leg locks soon. There's some situations in leg entanglements where there are some kind of one-off counters that your opponent can do when you have the saddle, for example, let's say the honey stick, right? And then from that one counter to the saddle, there's many different directions we can go. There's a whole rabbit hole that we can explore through the honey stick, how to prevent the honey stick from happening, how to make the honey stick more effective, follow-up attacks once you have the honey stick. How should you act when your opponent gets the honey stick on you? Now we're going down the rabbit hole of the honey stick, which is a very specific counter from the saddle. And so that is and it's very, very popular nowadays and super effective. You'll see that each system has these own little nuanced twists and turns that come up, and it's important to take note of them when it happens. Another thing, back when I was a purple belt, I was training with this guy I was teaching at a gym, and I put him in the truck. And from the truck, I was very good at either going to the back or hitting a calf slicer from there. It's one of the only places I find we can reliably hit calf slicers. And the way that I had my hand, I was grabbing on his foot and I was pulling down with my hands, and he reached through and was able to armbar me because my arm was extended through in between his legs. And I was like, I had to tap out because I had locked myself in the truck and I couldn't pull my arm out. I tapped out, and after I was like, I never fucking knew that counter existed. And he's like, yeah, man, that's a really good counter. You got to be careful about sticking your arm through there when you're going for that slicer. And ever since then, whenever I talk about the truck, whenever I teach the slicer from there, I always talk about that, because that was one moment where I was like, man, I don't want that to happen to any of my guys, because I made that one mistake in training. And then of course, it's never happened again because I'm aware of it now. It's like a one-off trick that someone can do when you're in that position. So it's almost like, beware of this one situation that can happen. And again, when you're working with systems, these little nuanced one-off moves can exist everywhere. And it's important to take note of them when we're teaching them. Train with people who are knowledgeable of whatever system you're doing. So if I have a guy who's a fantastic omoplata player, I'm going to try and I want to improve my omoplata, I'm going to go with him and I'm going to get him to put me in the omoplata and try and work my way out and see how he responds to my reactions. and see as I counter his counters, and as we go on to this cycle of offense defense, how is he following up with his attacks? Is he leaving the omoplata system because now I've done such a good job countering that he feels he must abandon omoplata and jump to something else? Is he able to submit me constantly the same way over and over again? Talk to them after. How are you doing that, right? You put them in the omoplata, see how they respond to the omoplata, and then you can get so much good information from somebody who is like really, really experienced in that situation. So if I wanted to learn leg locks from someone, I would try to partner up with a really good leg locker, or I would, study, mental study. I would look at like what Gordon and Danaher and Craig Jones, like the best leg lockers, the best leg lock coaches in the world, see what they do and how they respond, and, their insights in the positions. A lot of them conflict, like Danaher will talk about how a lot of people will go from 50-50. They'll put themselves in outside ashi because they think that it's a lesser position. But Gordon talks about how he prefers outside ashi to 50-50 because he considers it an asymmetrical position and he has a lot of confidence in his outside heel hook. So you'll hear different conflicting concepts, and really at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide what works best for you, your body type, your style. For me, things are constantly changing. I used to love attacking leg locks from 50-50. Now I really don't ever put myself there. I'd rather attack from outside ashi most of the time. And so things change over time, and that's really important. That's why it's so important to like always scrutinize yourself, always hold your system to intense scrutiny. Like never get offended, especially if you're a coach, you should never get offended if someone's asking you questions about your systems and really testing them, because what they really want to know is like, can I break your system? Like, is there a hole in your system that I can expose? Not to embarrass you, but just like, I want to know as the student if it can be done, because I want to have the best results, right? And as a coach, I've heard of coaches who kind of take this personally because they feel like they're being questioned and their ego is getting checked. It's like, man, I've had questions before from students, and they ask me like, why do you do this? And I've honestly been like, fuck, I don't know. I've just always kind of done it that way. Maybe there is a better way, right? And if just as a side note, as an instructor, as a coach, if you're okay with doing that, people respect you a lot more than if you create a persona of always needing to be right? To always needing to know everything. It's not a healthy persona. It's not sustainable. It's way better to always just play the student. Always, imagine that you're the student just trying to find the best answer for yourself. And then that way you can kind of remove ego from it. And then it becomes more of a culture about like, okay, well, coach doesn't care if I question him. He's trying to find out the best way too. And maybe I can show him something too. And if you're cool like that, as a coach, I think you'll find that there's a lot of positivity that can come within that learning environment. So always hold your systems to intense scrutiny. And then the last thing I think you can do when it comes time to develop a system, this is a very underrated thing, is teach it to somebody. Teach your system to somebody. If you can teach what you're doing to somebody, you're going to understand it so much more. Okay. Even if you're not a coach, even if you're not like a main instructor, I think just being like a training partner who's super cool and is willing to share knowledge and share information with your training partners. First of all, people are going to love training with you. And second of all, you're going to get really, really good at that system because you're forced to now think, okay, well, how would I teach this to someone? What would be the best concepts and the best way to do it? All right. Let's talk battle mats. So battle mats happened last night, and it's a tournament that happened in Vancouver. There's actually an MMA fight promotion. My cat's going crazy right now, guys. I don't know if you can tell. There's an MMA fight promotion in Vancouver called Battlefield Fight League. And they, I guess, are starting to do a jiu-jitsu promotion. And so they decided to do a 185-pound bracket, a no-gi bracket. And this was downtown Vancouver. It was held yesterday. The rule set is very similar to Fight Pass Invitational, if not, I guess, the exact same with a few minor differences. It's a 10-minute sub-only match followed by 5 minutes of points. The negative points carry over just like in Fight Pass Invitational. It's kind of a hybrid between ADCC and IBJJF. For example, they do allow cumulative points like the IBJJF, but they allow the turtling rule like in ADCC. A lot of the scoring situations, guard passing's worth 3, just like in IBJJF. Mount is worth 4, just like in IBJJF. You can pull guard at any time, which is really interesting, and you don't need grips to pull guard. So it's a lot of cool rules. Plus, they had one wall, so you could like wrestle on the wall, even though it really wasn't equipped for wall wrestling. Keep in mind, this is the first show. And just like somebody trying something new for the first time, anytime you do something for the first time, there's always going to be kinks and hiccups. Like the production, I have a lot of people watching the pay-per-view at home. It's only $10 American. And there was really intense issues with the audio. So hopefully if they do the show again, they're going to deal with that. There's always these like little hiccups as they're developing the best way to do things. But nonetheless, I competed in this tournament, and I'll just say right now, I did not win. I got second place. I lost in the finals to my buddy Lucas Wilhan, and it was the first time in competition. He's finished me. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. He strangled me from the back, and it was kind of heartbreaking. But so I get there at the venue, and I run into Kajan Johnson, and Kajan Johnson is an ex-UFC fighter. And just a little background on him, we've been going back and forth on social media recently, and Kajan's basically talking about how he's got this new system, and this kind of prompted my wanting to do an episode about systems, is because I've got this new system. I've developed this new system. He calls it his Primal combat grappling system, right? And then he goes on to explain in YouTube videos. He's actually got a pretty fucking successful YouTube channel, so I got to give him that credit. I don't know if it's purchased views or if it's just because he's got UFC clout, but he does have quite a few views, and I got to give him credit there. It's something that I want to get. And he's going on about how his new system is, it's I keep my head higher than their head, and that's primal combat grappling. Because if you're on the bottom, then your body's in a weak shape and all this stuff. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, that's more of a concept than a system, and it's not even a system that is really congruent with jiu-jitsu, because in jiu-jitsu you could be completely effective from the bottom position. Maybe in MMA that's a great concept, because in MMA if you're on the bottom you're getting punched, but in jiu-jitsu you could pull guard. And then he goes on to kind of make things personal, and he even calls me out by name. He actually names me alongside Gordon Ryan and Mikey Musumeci, which I found hilarious and flattering. Like, I don't think this guy is well. I think he's been hit in the head too many times, and I don't even know. He could be potentially on fucking, I don't know. Allegedly, he could be on some kind of fucking narcotics. He seems kind of strung out and like he's not knowing what he's talking about. Anyways, he's talking about how he's going to exterminate the world of guard pullers and leg lockers. And then he names me specifically. He's going to exterminate Matt Kwan. And I'm just like, okay, like I beat him in a tournament in the gi by 2 points. He didn't have any idea how to pass my guard. He just stood over top of me and tried to base out. And so that's kind of his style. I'm going to stand up and just stand in the guard and just absorb the Kazushi. It's like, okay, maybe that could be really good as a task focused game and make it hard for somebody to knock you down, but it's not really a viable path to victory in a grappling match. So anyways, this is his Primal combat grappling. And so we've been going back and forth a little bit. He's making fun of me because I like to pull guard and how I like, quote, men on top of me. And I'm calling him low IQ in the videos. We're hyping up these matches because I could potentially meet him in the second match if we both go through to the second match. And anyways, I see him at the venue. I shake his hand and everything and make sure that he knows it's going to be friendly. And we're smiling at each other. It's all good. And we go in there and we start warming up, and there's kind of 2 rooms, and one of the rooms is really small and the other room is kind of big, and fucking he stays in that room, and I'm like, fuck this, I'm going to the other room. And all the guys are in there. All the jiu-jitsu guys in the same tournament are basically in one room, which is really weird because you're all warming up together, and like a lot of times people don't want to warm up next to the person they're about to fight because you can kind of see what they're going to do. And you're always wondering, oh, are they watching me or whatever? And Uh, and so Kajan and Lucas were in the other room, and like me and all the other guys were in there just like shooting the shit, having fun, cracking jokes. It was a very relaxed environment. Honestly, it made the experience like really enjoyable because like I knew everyone in this 8-man bracket. I know who they are. And I don't hate any of them. And, you know, some of them are trained under me, you know, like John Chan is one of my black belts. I have a couple of students in the division as well. And this is really all just for fun when it comes down to it. But like we all wanted to win. And so we're all just warming up together. Anyways, my first match was against Jordan Stutt from 10th Planet. And I've beaten him before by 2 points and recently retrained. And I wasn't too concerned about this match. But again, I know anyone can get caught. He does have a size advantage on me. Yeah, I was able to put him in my close guard and sort of slow him down. I wasn't too worried about his passing. Then I was able to get on top. I mounted him. I started threatening roadhouse chokes on him, and I heard him gurgling. And I was trying to get to the arm triangle. I just couldn't do it. And then there was about a minute left, and I decided I was going to. What did I do? I was in mount. Oh, I backtracked into a 3/4 mount. And then I sort of backstepped into a reverse ashy. And then from there, I went and took double trouble. And then I just went like belly down knee bar, more or less. And I got the tap and I was happy to move on. And Jordan's a really nice guy. Planning on training with him this week. No ill will towards him at all. Then the second match, I was slated to fight the winner of Kajan Johnson and Daniel Richards. Kajan Johnson, like I just said, he's an ex-UFC veteran, black belt under Faraz Zahabi. He's the combat grappling, whatever fucking that is. And then Daniel Richards is a young kid who's got great leg locks. He's an MMA fighter as well. And he's dynamic as fuck. And he fought Kajan Johnson and basically knee barred him in like a minute and a half. This guy's known for his flying scissor takedowns. So he goes for a flying scissor takedown. Kajan just stands there and like just moves out of the way and it doesn't work. And then he just like gives him his leg again. And Daniel Richards just jumps and hits a beautiful flying scissor because like, you know, Kajan's not doing fucking anything. Just standing there with his leg exposed and inviting Daniel to do it. Daniel does it, goes underneath. He's trying to invert. Kajan just basing out. And he did look fucking hard to knock down. And then he just stands there and Daniel manages to apply a knee bar and knocks him on his butt and gets an instant tap. And I'm just thinking like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, why would you just... And then Kajan makes this video on YouTube about how, did my system get exposed? And I'm thinking like, dude, it's not a system. Like having good base and standing tall is not a system. You know, maybe it's good for like judo fighting. Maybe it's good for MMA, but this is fucking jiu-jitsu and guys are pulling guard and entering the legs and trying to submit you that way. Like you can't just stand in a leg entanglement and not try to untangle it. You can't have somebody spinning underneath to backside 50-50 and your response is just to stand there. You know, you have to backstep, you have to spin, you have to hide your heel. You got to do all this shit. And then he's so theatrical. I got to say, he's got me beat on style points. You know, he comes out in a gi top with no sleeves and gi pants cut into shorts, which looks fucking cool. I'm not going to lie. And a black belt on. And he's screaming and carrying on like a fool. And then after the match, he's in the back screaming. And, you know, it's all getting recorded for his YouTube channel. Kajan, I'll give you a plug here. Okay. What is it? TriStar West Coast, I think the YouTube channel is, or Coach Kajan Johnson or whatever. And yeah, there's a lot of people who are in the comments thinking that this is a real system. And they're like, yeah, you know, wow, you've really discovered something great here, and fire emojis in the comments. And it's like, dude, you couldn't get past the first round. You couldn't even get past the first round to fight me. And yet you're talking about, you're going to exterminate me. You're going to exterminate Matt Kwan and, you know, wipe guard pullers off the face of the earth. It's like, dude, do you know you're in a fucking jiu-jitsu competition? This isn't MMA. I can just pull guard under this rule set. If the rule set said, you know, if it's ADCC and you can't pull guard, okay, then I guess I'll wrestle you. But like, I don't have to wrestle you. You know what I mean? So he's a weird cat. But anyways, I fought Daniel Richards in the second match. Dude's super dynamic. He's dangerous. What can I say? I pulled guard, and whenever whenever I felt him come close, he was trying to suck my legs into a leg entanglement and fall back. So I was keeping my leg very shallow. In the end, I managed to wrestle up, and I actually hit this crazy like cartwheel back take. But man, I got to get better on the back because I fell off the back when he stood up. And then from there, I had to play guard again, and I did manage to enter a false reap, which led me into a backside 50-50 where I was able to finish a heel hook on him. I'm actually surprised I heel hooked him from there because it was getting pretty slippery, and fuck, he made me work really, really hard. Meanwhile, Lucas is just cleaning out guys, cleaning out his side of the bracket very, very quickly, and I'm having these matches that are basically like practically going the distance, right? And and so I get past Daniel Richards, and now it's time for the third match with Lucas. This is our seventh match together. We're 3-3 at this point. And, I think I could have gotten a bit more of a rest. I probably should have, they wanted me to really go out there, and I was like, man, I think I need more rest. And they're like, okay, take your time. And I felt pressured, but I did agree to go out there. I think I should have probably waited like another 10 minutes because I was pretty tired. I'm not going to lie. No, not making excuses, but this was the first event. So they didn't really have a match. They didn't have a match after my match with Daniel, like a super fight to kill the dead time in between, or they didn't have an intermission. They were just like they just had to roll into the next match. And I was like, fuck, man. Okay, I guess I'm going to go. And and so the first 10 minutes of me versus Lucas is us just clubbing each other over the head, just in the standing position. Nobody wants to pull guard. I really wanted to wrestle with him, and his hand fighting and just his clubbing, it was wearing me out, and I was having issues getting to any type of a takedown position. And what's worse is I felt like I was having those thoughts in your mind where you're like, fuck, am I too tired to finish a takedown? And that's like one of the worst thoughts you can have. Looking back on it, I almost wish that I had pulled guard because I think that it would have been difficult for him to pass my guard, and I could have probably funneled the fight into a leg exchange, which would have probably been a smarter tactic. I was able to hit a duck and go to his back, but he recovered very, very nicely. And then I was also able to pick up a single leg as the match ended, but then we went into overtime. In overtime, I regret not pulling guard. That was my mistake. He pulled, and then I could tell by his stance that he was looking to wrestle up. I was trying to give him some pressure, and he was able to, I think he used a variation of R guard, reverse guard, to off balance me and then hit a wrestle up. And then I basically made the same fucking mistake I made against him at ADCC Vancouver, which is I turtled. And I honestly probably should have just conceded the sweep. He went to my back, and I was trying to like roll out of it. But the thing is, we were right next to the edge, and I had nowhere to roll. I couldn't even hit a turning escape. And that's when he locked a body triangle. And right around this point, I'm like, fuck, it's happening again. Like, this guy's so good on my back. He's so long that I felt like his body triangle was kind of unstoppable. And I'm getting pretty fucking tired at this point. And then I turtled. I tried to stand up, and slams are illegal. And I was very highly considering slamming him backwards, but I just didn't have like any energy. And I ended up tapping out standing actually to a rear naked. And it was really fucking difficult. And yeah, it's, reflecting on that match, and my hat goes off to Lucas because he is a really great competitor, and he beat me concisely in this match. When you have a match like that, it's just so fascinating how, you think about it, how it's going to go 100 times before the match happens. And all you can think about is like, okay, I want to make no mistakes, or I want to make few mistakes. I want to pick the game plan that gives me the best chance of victory. But in reality, it's like, man, I didn't really choose a good game plan. Like, I should have pulled guard, and I should have maybe conceded the sweep when he came up on for that wrestle up instead of turtling and exposing my back. When I came up, maybe I should have slammed him, but for whatever reason, I didn't. I hesitated. Slamming is not something that I do often, and I don't even think it would have helped me in this case, but like, it probably would have been a better thing than just to tap, right? And all these little things I could have done or should have done. It's like, it's interesting when you're in a match like that and you just don't have the gas, and you start making decisions that you shouldn't make, and it becomes so much more difficult to defend things like body triangles and rear nakeds and things like that. And yeah, the truth is I lost that match, and I've been training pretty decently hard for this competition coming up to it. And I felt like I should have pulled in the overtime frame. I think it would have gone a lot better for me, but for whatever reason, I wanted to be on top. I envisioned myself being on top and kind of pressuring his guard, but man, he had a great wrestle up that I kind of misjudged. And in the end, he ended up coming up and making me turtle. And so I feel like maybe turtling there was a big mistake. Maybe I should have conceded the sweep and see if I could have heisted and faced him rather than turning. But I was just thinking about the points so much, which is exactly what happened at the ADCC. Now, I'd like to discuss like the importance of loss, even though it might be like a loser mentality. You know, I was hoping to record this with a belt in front of me being like, yeah, I won battle mats last night. But it's important to talk about the importance of losing, because losing does take us to another level for sure, right? If we approach it in the correct way. And I've talked about it on the show before. If you lose and you just don't adjust anything, that is not really, that's not going to be beneficial, right? And it's going to be shitty. But if you lose and you're like, okay, what did I do well? I was really happy with the first two matches. The second, the third match with Lucas, like even with the wrestling exchanges, thinking about how I fought him, I'm like, man, I didn't really do much on the feet. Like I kind of let him push me around. It wasn't really the fight that I wanted to fight. And, I really needed to like make more shit happen. You know, I should have gone for the singles. I should have tried to make things happen, but I don't know if it was the fatigue or what it was. I just didn't have that extra burst of energy, and I didn't have the right strategy going into overtime. I mean, 10 minutes is a long match in its own, and then you add a 5-minute overtime. And I guess I just didn't have the conditioning, or I didn't get enough rest in between, whatever excuse it was. I couldn't handle it, and I ended up getting my back taken and strangled. And so I'm trying to think about like, what could I have done differently in preparation? You know, where should I allocate my training now leading up to a couple of competitions that are coming up in the next couple of months, which I'll talk about. Where should I kind of go with this? And as I think as long as you're approaching your losses in that way, there's definitely value to it, because we've all lost, right? We've all lost if you compete. And I think it's better to have tried and lost than to not try at all. At least that's the mentality that I have. I think it's so important to have at least given your best effort. And if you compete with high level guys and you end up losing, there's always takeaways. And a lot of the time I win these tournaments, and I've beaten Lucas before, but in this case, he got the better of me. So my hat's off to him. Main takeaways, I really want to work on my back control and attacks, because I'm so into mount these days. I like being on top, and I think I need to revisit my back attacks, and also turtling, how I'm going to attack the turtle, and how am I going to work my wrestling. This is all kind of like ADCC style grappling, right? And we do have ADCC coming to Vancouver in October. I plan on doing that division. I'm sure Lucas is going to do it too. And I'd love to get a match with him again. We'll see if the bracket, if it holds that in both of our destiny to meet again at ADCC Vancouver in October. And of course, like I came away from this competition completely uninjured, and I'm super grateful for that. I think that that's really, really important when you compete. Whether you win or lose, is just be grateful. There's so many things to be grateful for, even if you didn't win the competition. Like I won a competition a couple of weeks ago, and it was great. I wasn't injured, but really being able to go into training tomorrow morning and train hard with the guys in comp class, that's like, I'm grateful for that, you know. I'm grateful that I could go to such a cool event, and there was people there, you know, who had paid to watch us fight, and everyone was like, man, your fights were so awesome, and it was so exciting. It's like, man, that's what I want to hear. Like, I want to hear people enjoyed it, and that we're able to do jiu-jitsu justice. It just sucks that there's a highlight reel of Lucas on my back, rear naked, strangling me. But hey, that's how it goes sometimes. You know, if you're going to compete with high level guys, you are going to end up eventually getting caught. And I don't get submitted in competition often. And this is one of those times where maybe the decisions I made led me to that, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't making the decisions that I should have made. And it's something to reflect on for next time, and something to build on, and something to help fuel me. So I'm grateful for the wins, the losses, the ups and the downs. So like I said, 80cc Vancouver is coming up in October, and also Fight to Win is coming to Vancouver for the very first time. That's going to be August 3rd. I believe I'm fighting 10th Planet black belt from Calgary named Corey Guittard, I believe his name is. I think he's about 200 pounds, and I'm walking around at 185 pounds, but it should be an interesting fight. Fight to Win, I believe, are 6-minute matches, sub only. So it's going to be, a quick paced match. None of this 15-minute match bullshit. It's fucking such a long fight. To go 15 minutes, I think I probably could have trained. I could have adjusted my conditioning in camp to do that a little bit more. I feel like that was my conditioning was not where it needed to be. Reflecting on that final match, I think I could maybe have adjusted the way that I approached my cardio training for this camp. So I'm looking forward to Fight to Win, and I'm looking forward to 80cc. And that is it, guys. All in all, it was a great experience. It was a great competition, even though I didn't fucking get it done, lost in overtime, but that's how she goes sometimes. And you know what? If you're competing and you lose, don't ever fucking hate yourself for losing in competition, because first of all, we can't win them all. And second of all, not many people put their ass on the line there and try and, go out there in front of people and compete. A lot of people are happy to just be recreational, or they don't do jiu-jitsu at all, and they couldn't imagine what it's like to go out there and compete on the big stage. And the truth is that I love it. I do it because it's stressful and it's fun and it's hard. And that's why I think everyone should, at least anyone who practices jiu-jitsu should try competing at least once, because it is truly different from just sparring in the gym. And it's one of those love-hate relationships for me. And as long as my body's good, I'm going to keep doing it. Anyways, guys, if you want to support the show, please check out the links in the bottom. As I had mentioned, all my products and offerings are down there. I really appreciate your guys' support for the show. And I should mention that over the next little while, I'm going to start recording premium audio episodes for you guys. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to subscribe to some premium content. Hopefully you guys will check it out, and I'm hoping that the content will be good enough that it's worth your while. But until then, guys, remember that the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. Take care, guys. Peace.